All right, today we're diving into the core ideas from Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets. The book's whole argument is built on a simple, powerful, and honestly, a kind of uncomfortable truth. Every single meaningful decision you make in life is actually a bet. Now, hold on. This isn't about running off to a casino. When you choose a career path, when you buy a house, or even when you start a new project at work, you're making a bet on how you think the future is going to unfold. You're wagering on probabilities because let's face it, you never have all the information and you certainly don't control all the variables. And that deep uncertainty, it makes most of us really uncomfortable. We're wired to crave certainty. We want to be right. So when things inevitably go wrong, what's our first instinct? Usually, it's to find someone or something to blame. But that exact mindset is what can trap us in a cycle of really poor decision-making. This leads us to a crucial distinction. Life is not a game of chess. In chess, every single piece is visible. It's a game of pure calculation and near certainty. Life is much more like poker. It's a game of incomplete information, hidden cards, and a massive dose of luck. The skill isn't about guaranteeing a win, because you can't. It's about making the best possible bet with the information you have. So, this brings us to our first common thinking trap, and this is a big one. It explains why really good, well-thought-out decisions can still have bad outcomes. You see, the mistake we all make is that we have a really, really hard time separating the quality of our decision from the quality of its result. I mean, think about it like this. A drunk driver who somehow makes it home safely might convince himself it was fine. That's a terrible decision with a lucky outcome. On the flip side, a really careful investor who does all their research can still lose a ton of money in a market crash. That's a good decision with a bad outcome. The results alone just doesn't tell the whole story. Poker players actually have a name for this mistake. They call it outcome bias. This trap is particularly dangerous because life rarely gives you feedback that cleanly separates skill from luck. So if you judge your decisions only by the results, you're going to consistently learn the wrong lessons over and over again. So how do we escape this trap? Well, Annie Duke suggests a pretty radical shift in our thinking. We need to start treating every single decision just like what it is, a bet. This is all about shifting our mindset. Instead of asking that black and white question, was I right or wrong, you ask a much more nuanced one. Okay, what were the odds and how confident was I? This simple change does something incredibly powerful. It forces you to admit uncertainty, and it replaces that all or nothing thinking with thinking in probabilities. But there's a big hurdle here, our own brains. We are hardwired to defend our beliefs. We go out looking for confirming evidence, and we actively ignore anything that threatens our view of ourselves as smart, competent people. This is called motivated reasoning, and it's pretty much why arguments so rarely change anyone's mind. So how do we get around our own stubborn brain? Well, Annie Duke offers a brilliantly simple workaround. Just ask yourself this one little question. Want to bet? The moment something is truly at stake, even if it's just hypothetical, your thinking completely changes. Your goal shifts from just being right to being accurate. You become more careful, more curious, and a whole lot more open to the possibility that you might be wrong. Betting reframes your belief as a claim about probability, not a declaration of absolute truth. Okay, so better thinking doesn't just stop at the moment of choice. It has to continue after the outcome is known. This is where the real learning actually happens. Annie Duke calls this outcome fielding. It's the process of looking back at your results to learn from them, which means you have to set aside your ego and emotions so they don't distort the actual lesson. And man, this is incredibly hard because we're all wired with a powerful self-serving bias. When things go well, we credit our skill. When they go badly, we blame bad luck or other people. I mean, to illustrate this, studies show that drivers blame others for car accidents over 90% of the time, even in single-car crashes. It's wild. To learn effectively, you have to fight that instinct by changing the question you ask after the fact. Don't just ask, what happened? Instead, ask, okay, what part of this outcome was due to my skill? What part was just luck? And what was simply unknowable at the time? The honest answer is almost always a mix of all three. This is the habit of elite performers. The legendary poker player Phil Ivey, for example, would dissect his play for mistakes even after winning massive tournaments. For him, the real reward wasn't the victory, it was the improvement. And that's the key shift. You stop protecting your ego and you start protecting your future decisions.
This whole process becomes a lot easier when you stop trying to do it all by yourself. In fact, Annie Duke argues that the fastest way to improve your decisions is to surround yourself with people who are also committed to seeking the truth, not just protecting their own egos. She proposes a framework for a group like this called KUDOS. It's an acronym that stands for communalism, or sharing information openly; universalism, applying the same high standards to everyone's ideas; disinterestedness, which is focusing on an idea's merit, not who gets credit; and organized skepticism. In short, it's all about creating a culture where you challenge ideas without attacking people.
Finally, let's tackle one more big trap. We consistently make decisions that feel good for our present self, but they come at a huge expense to our future self. We stay up too late, we delay uncomfortable work. Yep, we've all been there. A simple but powerful tool to fight this is the 10-10-10 method. Before making a choice, just ask yourself, how will I feel about this in 10 minutes? How will I feel about it in 10 months? And how will I feel about it in 10 years? This technique actually pulls those future consequences into the present moment where they can have some influence over your choice. So the core ideas from Thinking in Bets are pretty simple, but they can definitely be uncomfortable. You're never going to eliminate uncertainty. You're never going to control luck. So stop chasing certainty. Stop judging your decisions by their outcomes alone, and start thinking in probabilities. Because ultimately, the goal is not to be right all the time. That's just impossible. The goal is to get better at making the best possible bet with the information you have again and again and again. That's really the core of Thinking in Bets. And that leaves just one question for you to consider as you go about your day. What's your next bet?